Hello everyone, welcome to week 4 core where we're going to be focusing on adding sounds and also changing a little bit of the backdrops that we have depending on the score, and that's what we have looking forward to for week 4. So to begin, we're going to go ahead and start with adding the sounds to our game, and this is going to be broken up into 2 parts. So the first part, we're going to be focusing on the bullet sound, the enemy sound, the background sound, and our start game sound. So to begin with the bullet sound, we know that it's not going to be in the actual bullet. And that is because this code is only focusing on making sure that the bullet moves, making sure that our score is reset, making sure that our bullet is positioned. It's not actually creating the bullet. What's creating the bullet is inside the player code, where if you guys look at this block of code here, every time the mouse is down, that is when our bullet is created, and that is where we want the sound to start. We want it to start when the bullet is first being launched. So we have 2 options as to how we can add sounds, and I'll leave this up to you guys. The first way that you can add sound is you can go ahead and go onto the Fuchsia Sound tab. You're going to add a start sound, and we can go ahead and add it before our bullet is actually created. And then right above this, I'm going to add a set volume to 100%. So now it's kind of up to me to kind of decide how loud I want my sound to be. So it's always nice just to start off making everything 50 for right now. And then once you test all of your sounds all together, you can then go ahead and start playing around which sounds you want to be louder, which sounds you want to be softer, and so on and so forth. The other thing that you can go ahead and do is you can go ahead and pick the sound that you want. So we can go ahead and click on the sound tab. You can hover over, choose a sound, and click on it. I can go ahead and go into effects, which are quick, short sounds that you guys can find. So, for example, maybe if I hover over here, I can hear the sound that is going to be played if I pick this one. I'm going to use the pop sound. That's the one that I choose. I'm going to go into code, and then I'm just going to go ahead and swap it out for my new sound. Now, inside of the sound tab, if you guys want to adjust anything for the sound, either making it sound faster or slower, or if you guys want to add a fade in and fade out, make it sound more like a robot, there's a lot of stuff that you guys can do to kind of adjust the sound. So even if you don't find one that's exactly what you want, maybe you could make it what you want. Other things that you guys can do is you guys can record your own sound. So for example, maybe when I click the record button, I'll hit my table in order to make kind of the sound effect that I want for my bullet, or I can make the sound with my mouth. So you guys can also create your own sound, and that's also really nice. You can also upload a sound. You guys can always look at the other games that we've done where we've gone onto YouTube, downloaded a sound, imported it into our game, and then added it as the sound that we want. So you guys can do that as well as another option. But essentially, once you have your sound, this is pretty much done. The problem is every single time you create a bullet, the sound will start. And that can easily get a little bit annoying because especially with the amount of times you're shooting always constantly in order to destroy the enemy, it can easily get very annoying. So if you don't like this first option because of that, this next option will work way better. So I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect this, add my code back. I'm not going to delete this yet. I'm just going to save it. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto my yellow events tab. I'm going to add a when I receive. I'm going to add a new message, and I'm going to call this bullet sound. Okay. It's always nice to organize stuff and be very specific. Don't use weird random words, because you want to make sure that when you come back to it later on, if you always want to fix it or tweak it, you know exactly what this is, which is a bullet sound. It makes it just a little bit easier. So we're going to add the bullet sound, and then we're going to add a broadcast above our create clone of bullet, and we're going to change this to our bullet sound. Here we go. So now when the mouse is down, it's going to broadcast bullet sound, and then when I receive bullet sound, I'm going to play the sound. However, we're not just going to put that here. So these two blocks, we're not just going to put it right underneath here because it's still going to do the same thing. It just looks a little bit different. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go onto control and we're going to add an if then else. Inside of this if then else, we're going to go ahead and go into operators and add an equal sign. So we're looking to see when something equals something. And specifically what we're going to go ahead and do is, on the empty bubble, I'm going to add a pick random. The pick random, depending on what numbers you place, makes the sound either play faster or slower. It's easier just to start off by changing the 10 to a 2 and then changing the 50 to a 1. So it's going to randomly pick a number between 1 and 2. If it's 1, then it's going to do the first bracket. If it's a 2, it's going to do the second bracket. I'm going to pick wherever I want my sound to be. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong way of placing it. I'm just going to go ahead and add it on my first bracket. So now what happens is, if my pick random is 1, and it equals to 1, which it does, it's going to play my pop sound. If it ends up being 2, this else is empty, so it won't do anything. So this is exactly what we want to happen. So now every time you shoot, it's not every single bullet that's making the sound. It's random when it actually happens. So sometimes it may not happen for a little while before you hear a couple. Sometimes you'll hear a couple. It'll make it very, very random, and that makes it a little bit easier to actually have a sound like that, especially because our bullet is always going to be firing. So this is what you want your code to look like. So you're updating this code and you're creating this block of code here. The next sound that we want to go ahead and do is we want to add it to our enemy. Now, if you guys have multiple enemies, you want to go ahead and do what you did to one of them to every single one of them. I'm just going to show you how to do it to one enemy, but it's your job to make sure that, for example, I have my enemy 2. I have to go into my enemy 2 and do the same thing I did for my first enemy. So if you guys have multiple ones, that's what you guys want to do. So for our enemy, the main place where we want to go ahead and we want to actually have our enemy have a sound isn't going to be during the create like we had for our bullet, but it's actually going to be when they are destroyed, okay? And specifically, we're looking for if touching bullet, wait, delete this clone, because this is where our enemy actually gets destroyed by our actual bullet. We can also add a sound for when our enemy touches the player and then it dies. So that part is also up to you guys, depending on where you got in the game. So to start off, we're going to go ahead and click on the sound tab. And it's going to be the same thing as well. You can either add the sounds right above the wait 0 second, but remember you have multiple enemies. You're going to constantly be firing at them. Do you really want to have that sound playing over and over and over again really quickly? Probably not. It'll get a little bit annoying. So instead, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to do this similar thing. So we're going to add a when I receive. I'm going to add in a new message. I'm going to add enemy lose sound. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to just go ahead and click on my broadcast, add it right above, and I'm going to change this to my enemy lose sound. And I'm just going to do the same thing. So I'm going to add my if then else, going to go into operators, add the equal sign, going to make this, and I can change it up to, I'll make this a 2, and this time I'll make a pick random from 1 to 3. So now there's even more options for when the actual sound isn't played, so you guys have to keep in mind that. So if it's a 1, it won't play a sound. If it's a 2, it won't play a sound. If it's a 2, it will play the sound, but if it's a 3, it won't play a sound. So there's 2 times where my sound won't be played. If you don't like that, because it makes it a little bit harder to actually get to hear a sound, then you can always just go ahead and just make it from 1 to 2, because that makes it a little bit easier. Next, I'm going to go ahead and go inside of my sound tab, and I'm going to add my start sound, and I'm going to add the volume. I'm going to go ahead and make this a 50. And then I can always just go onto my sound tab, click on choose a sound, go into effects or even animals as well, especially since I have a creature. I can go ahead and find the sound that I want to use, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on it, go back into the code, and make sure that I just swap it out. Okay. Maybe I'll just place it here. So if you notice, here we'll make it a little bit easier. So if my random number is a 2, then it won't play a sound. If it's a 1, it will play the sound. So now this should work. And like I said, so this is specifically for an enemy lose sound. So when our enemy touches the bullet that we have, they lose. So this is an enemy lose sound. Now over here, where we have this delete this clone, this is where our player itself actually gets hit by the enemy. And then they lose. So if you guys didn't get to do the player health, then once they touch you once, you lose. If you do have the player health, then you will only have 10 chances to hear the sound. So it's not the same amount as when you're shooting or constantly destroying enemies. So because of that, you don't have to use this same method that we just did right now to play the sound, because it's not going to be playing that much to begin with. So because of that, we're just going to easily, right above the delete this clone, I'm just going to add a set volume. I'm going to change this to 50 for right now, and I'm going to add a start sound. Okay. So just make sure that this sound in particular is for the player that's losing, not the enemy, but the player. So that means I need a completely different sound. So I'm going to go back here, I'm going to click on my sound tab, I'm going to maybe add a lose sound. Because this is very long, I'm just going to make it short. So I'm just going to click the very end. I'm going to continue dragging until I get to about this part, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. So now it kind of sounds like this. Okay. And then I can add a fade out. So now I'm just going to go back into my code, and I'm going to add the lose sound. And as you see here, now if my player gets touched by the enemy, it'll play this sound to let my player that's playing the game know, hey, an enemy actually touched you, you lost health. Whereas this sound is specifically playing for, okay, so you shot an enemy and they've gone down. This is the sound for that. So you guys have these two things that you guys can do for the enemy. The next thing is going to be our play sound. So when you go onto your intro screen, we're going to go ahead and go here. So specifically, we're looking for when this sprite is clicked, because when we click on the play button, that's when we want that sound to quickly appear. And what we can go ahead and do is right above the repeat 10, we can add a set volume to 100. Again, I'm just going to change it to 50. And then underneath that, I'm going to add a start sound, and then I can just go ahead and pick the sound that I want to use for my introduction screen. Just make sure that it's not very long, again, because the introduction screen immediately hides itself right after, so you really don't want to make a sound that's very long, especially if you're going to have a background sound start after. So once you're done with that, the last sound for this part of the video is going to be the background sound. So we're just going to go ahead and go to the stage. We're going to add a when I receive. And we're specifically waiting for, so for those of you guys that have the intro screen only, you're only looking for the play game. And that's when you want your actual sound to start. For those of you who have the character select screen, you actually want to wait until the start game because you're still in the character select. And then once that's been clicked, specifically this button, that's when we want to go ahead and start the background sound. So depending on which one you guys have is what you guys place. So since I have the character select, I'm going to add a start game. If I only had the intro screen, I would have just added the play game. So after this, I'm just going to go ahead and add a forever. I'm going to go into my sound. and I'm going to add a set volume. This one, for right now, I'm just going to make it 20 because I want my sound effects to be louder than my background sound. My background sound just helps kind of set the mood, but it's really my sound effects. So my bullet sound, my enemy sound, is what I'm really paying attention to because that's what's going to help the player know when something is happening on the game. Underneath this, I'm going to add a play sound until done. So this is important. We're not adding a start sound because it'll stop the sound midway and continue repeating that sound. We want that sound to play completely, and then once it's done, it can replay the sound. So we can go ahead and go onto the sound tab, click on choose a sound, and this time I'll click on loops because those sounds are a little bit longer. Once you pick a sound, you can go back and swap it out. As an added bonus, if you guys don't want to just have the same sound looping, you can add another play sound and add another sound after that, and you can have a third one as well. I wouldn't go no more than 3, only because the more sounds that you have, it makes the file, so when you're actually saving your game, it just makes it a little bit too big, and then it makes it take longer time to load, or it'll start lagging and making it a little bit slow. So just keep it at 3 at most. And that way it won't just replay the same sounds over and over and over again. So once you're done with this, you guys can go ahead and go to the next part of the video.